Blackhawk instructor pilot. Also have a fixed wing rating on just a private pilot license, fixed wing rating. And yeah, I just love flying and love talking about it, love teaching, so it's my passion. Really appreciate you guys coming out with all your questions, and there have been quite a few so far, so let's just jump right to it. First of all, I just want to give a shout out to Jesse Holmes here, who has renamed me Big Daddy Snack Pack, so thanks so much, Jesse. All right, so first question looks like it's from Booba VDP, and Buddha asks, do you think that helicopters have a future in aviation? Drone technology is getting better and much cheaper and efficient. What are your thoughts about this? I think drone technology is certainly really powerful for doing reconnaissance and stuff like that, as far as the military aspect goes. But there was actually a news article, DARPA, yeah, I believe it was DARPA, just flew a Blackhawk completely unmanned a few months ago. You can research that on the internet. They did a whole thing on it. But I think we're a ways out from having everything fully automated. I guess my question would be, and I've heard, this is not an original statement, not an original Snack Pack statement, but the question would be, if you're okay with getting on one of those things, then go for it, right? And we'll see how many people are comfortable being on a automated aerial transport without any kind of real pilot there to react, you know. So certainly aviation has always been, maybe not always, but for the, you know, in modern times is far safer than driving a car. But even with, you know, the autonomous vehicles that Tesla's come out with, which are like, has this crazy AI, you know, there have been a few mistakes that have happened, you know, and there's always going to be growing pains with new technology. So I think that for some time we're going to have an environment where people are definitely going to want a human on board controlling the aircraft. And right now, I think it's a perfect balance, because a lot of like any airline you get on, I mean, there's so many autopilot functions on that aircraft. A lot of them can just land themselves at this point, which is amazing. So I think that you know, in time, I think it could be a possibility, but I think if I had to put a number on it, I would say we're at least 40, 50 years out from having a realistic, sustainable environment where you know, automated AI vehicles, so to speak, you know, drones and such, like things like that are actually flying people around. I think we'll probably see it sooner with like Amazon, which I don't know, are they already doing, is Amazon already sending drones out to deliver stuff? I think I know I saw something about it, but they definitely don't do it where I live. But I think we'll start to see that first, and then maybe a long time down the line we might start to see automated vehicles that are safer than what we have today, which I think is a great blend of automated systems and human intervention. So great question though. All right, Manny, he will probably give us a gallon of pudding. I don't have a gallon of pudding for you today, but I appreciate it. That means you watched the epic saga of Snack Pack, so thanks for watching. All right, Max Caulfield says, I'm a bit curious as to how to set up an appropriate control curve to maximize the feeling of flying the real thing, because many of us don't have access to those Puma series level sticks. Thanks. So guys, I've gotten a lot of flack for using my little Logitech Extreme 3D. This is my little guy that I still use. I've had it for, I don't know, at least 10 years. I think a lot longer than that. And honestly, I just go default on the settings, right? I'm just using default settings. The helicopters that I've flown in the Sims so far, like the Blackhawk and DCS, is super realistic, but it seems like no matter how strongly I push side to side on the joystick, even if I change the settings, it doesn't replicate how sensitive a real cyclic would be in a real Blackhawk. So it's kind of just like I've had to adapt to the sim, you know. And when I see the helicopters doing what I want it to do, that's when I know, okay, this is the right control input, you know. But in a real helicopter, it's much different, you know. So you can learn a lot in the sims as to how systems work, what switches to push, how to read dials, developing a scan, developing general techniques. But until you get into the real aircraft, you're not gonna really know how it handles, you know. And that's really the same for anything, because you know, like you just pointed out, everybody's got different peripherals, everybody's using different joysticks and different, you know, whatnot. So, you know, you really just need to get into a real aircraft to see how it compares to real life. So, let me get a little sip of my coffee over here. I didn't really think this through using this microphone. All right, that mulching guy. What flight sim setup are you using? Controls, PC, monitor, and VR setup. So I built my own PC. Let's see if I can show you guys here. So this is my PC I built. I did not spend a lot of money on a case because I didn't want to. Because I didn't want to. Let me see if I can change these settings a little bit. Get this blur off. There we go. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on a case. I was more concerned with the internals, right? So I've got a Zotac RTX 3090 Ti, and I did a lot of negotiating to get that at a price that I could afford. About was 5-6 months ago, is before all the 40 series stuff came out. I've got a what is this, a Aurora, it's like a Z4 590 something motherboard, I can't remember, but it's basically an Intel 12th gen chipset. It's a 12900K CPU, and I've got a Samsung hard drive, solid state drive. It's just a terabyte, which I've already gone through almost all that with all the new stuff that people keep wanting me to get. People keep wanting me to try different apps and stuff, different sims. So yeah, so that pretty much does it for my PC. Now, as far as the rest of my setup, I've got this Samsung monitor that I got from Walmart for 75 bucks. It's a 32-inch monitor. So this is brand new. This is actually the shelf display model, and I talked him down to 75 bucks, down from like 250 or something. So it's got like, it's basically brand new. You can't even tell that it was even a floor model. But I got that on a little stand, and I got some Christmas lights up here. They're just helping to set the mood. But I've got I already talked about my joystick. I've got the Satec little throttle quadrant here. So this is really great if you guys haven't seen this before. This thing's only, I think I paid like 50 bucks for it, but it's got like little additional pieces you can put. So these little knobs like pop off, and you can change what you want to put on there. So right now this is like my Blackhawk config, and I use this as my collective, and then I use this for my power control levers for each engine, so I can cut them off. You'll see in my Blackhawk how to land video, I do a single engine failure and then a dual engine failure, and then I can adjust my collective from here, right? So I'm just waiting on some of these flight control companies to send me some better stuff, but you know, is what it is. And then down here I've got my Satec pedals. There I've got the honeycomb yoke, which is awesome. I highly recommend that for fixed wing stuff. And I've kind of done some wire management down here. This is where I put my phone to record my feet for the pedals. Right here, and I gotta fix this thing here, but this is, a lot of people ask how I connect my Bose A20 to the computer, and that is this little guy. It's a Flight Sounds FSX-GA. So Bose, or I'm sorry, General Aviation headsets have a 1/4 inch for the your speakers, your headphones, and then for the microphone it uses this. I'm kind of messing with the audio there. For the microphone it uses like a slightly smaller, I think it's like a 0.22 inch, some kind of weird jack, but that's pretty standard for general aviation. But anyway, yeah, you can get this little adapter. It just hooks up with USB, and I really like it a lot. So, and then up here I've got the Reverb G2 that I use for VR. That's connected, and then I got the little controllers down there. So that is my rig. All right, who's next? Okay, have you ever had an engine fail while flying? So I have never had an intentional engine failure while flying, but on a regular basis, I induce engine failures when I teach my students. engine failures are a pretty big deal, right? Especially in a single engine aircraft. So like when I was getting my PPL for fixed wing, that was like a regular thing where my instructor would just pull the throttle all the way back. So it wasn't a real engine failure, so we could always recover by adding throttle back in if something weird happened during the training. But for all intents and purposes, if you pull the throttle all the way back on a on a Cessna, 172, I mean you're going down one way or the other, right? Unless you put that throttle back in. So um, we always practice for this, like all the time. This is actually foundational. Once you get the basics down, if you ever go through a flight training program in real life, once you get the basics down of how to maneuver the aircraft, the next thing is how to respond to emergencies, right? Because they do happen, engine failures do happen. In the Blackhawk, it's a dual engine aircraft. So if one engine fails, it's normally not a big deal, right? The other engine has plenty to keep you flying and get you to your destination, right? You might have to think about how you're going to land, right? And in my how to land a Blackhawk video, which got like a ton of views, if you watch that one, you'll see that you might have to just roll it on and land with a little bit of forward airspeed because it requires less power, and that's the same thing with even on a skidded aircraft, a skidded helicopter. You can actually run those things. I call it a run-on. You can run it on and just kind of skid across the ground, But it always takes a lot more power to hover in a helicopter than it does to fly in forward flight. So yeah, I induce those all the time on my students, like on a regular basis. I'll pull it back and then they have to react to it. But never had one in an actual engine failure. I have had engine malfunctions, and again, sometimes you'll get a little chip of the engine might break off, and then there's a little detector that'll detect if there's a chip in your engine, right? And a lot of jet engine aircraft have this, right? Have like a little chip detector in there. So, if you get that light, it's like, oh man, there's something wrong with that engine. Like we need to probably turn that thing off. So I have had some engine malfunctions where I had to induce a single engine failure. I had to turn it off, and then you just go land. It's really not a big deal, especially if you're on a like an airline. The average person would just freak out if the captain came over the radio and said, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have a engine failure." Right? Everybody would just freak out, but a single engine failure on even a 747, some of those big aircraft that have like 4 engines, right? Like it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all. So, and not only that, but think about how many engine failures you've had in a car, right? Probably a lot of people have never had an engine failure, right? You can do minimal maintenance to your car. I've got a car with like 100,000 miles on it. I keep the oil changed regularly, and that engine has never failed, right? And 100,000 miles, I've never had an engine fail on me in a car. And in the world of aviation, the level of maintenance that is required is so much higher than what is required on a vehicle. I mean, technically, there's no maintenance required on your vehicle, right? But there are all the regular inspections that have to be done on even just like a little single engine Cessna, right? I mean, you have to have immaculate logbooks per the FAA. And so engine failures in modern times are actually fairly rare. They do happen, but for the amount of flights that go up every day in this world, if you were to take how many engines fail on a given day, it's not very significant. But like I said, even in that event, any good pilot is trained to know how to respond to that. And oftentimes, if you just remain calm, it's not really a big deal at all. So, good question. All right. Max Caulfield again. He says, "You said earlier, if it wants to drift, let it drift. That helped me a lot. Now I'm doing hover so much better. Over controlling is the root of all evil." Yeah, that the hardest thing for beginner helicopter students to learn is how to hover, right? Because we equate it to the analogy of standing up on a beach ball, right? So you have all these different controls, and each one, as you move it, it's affecting the other one. So it can be really difficult to hover at first, and you just got to get a feel for it. I mean, it's really just like driving a car. Like eventually, at first, it's you're slamming that brake pedal, and everybody in the car lunges forward, and their seatbelts lock up. but after a while you get the feel of it, and it's the same thing with a helicopter. But yeah, over controlling is definitely the biggest error that novice helicopter students make, and uh, the fixed wing students as well. But yeah, my best advice if you're trying to learn how to hover, like even in the simulator, if the helicopter starts drifting one way or the other, just let it drift for a minute and apply a very slow correction to that. Just very minor corrections. The flight controls are very sensitive on helicopters, and they really need to be, but they're very sensitive. So finding what we call the hover button on a helicopter can be tricky. But just let it drift a little bit, and then just slowly add your correction in, and then after a while you won't even need to let it drift. But at first it's helpful to just kind of let the helicopter do what it wants to do. Obviously, don't drift into a building or a tree or anything. Try to maintain your position as best you can. But drifting a little bit forward after lateral, it's not a huge deal as long as you eventually correct for it and just make minor little adjustments and start with that, and eventually you'll see, oh great, I'm starting to get used to making whatever correction is necessary to kind of hold my position there. Cool. All right, that mulching guy is asking if I have any tips or advice for someone considering the street to seat program. So my advice would be that if being an Army aviator is something that you really think is for you, I would get on it like ASAP. Keep in mind, if you make this decision, you're looking at, if you get accepted, you're looking at about a 12-year commitment. Because the first 2 years are all training, and then once you finish training, it's a 10-year service obligation. So just make sure it's something that you can see through to the end. And most people I know who are in the job have no issue with that. It's a really great career. You definitely work hard. And you will earn your pay for sure. But getting to fly, these multi-million-dollar aircraft with thousands of horsepower and, flying right above the trees at 120 knots, it's pretty awesome. I can't imagine doing anything else. Maybe one day being an airline pilot or something, I guess. I don't know. But for the time being, I can't, there's not really many other places where you can get the adrenaline rush of flying a helicopter, and the modes of flight that we do. But even just general aviation is so much fun. I actually really enjoy just flying little single engine airplanes around. It's so much fun to me. It's a lot less stress than a big aircraft like a Blackhawk, because it's much more complex. But a little single engine aircraft is a lot of fun. But to get started, the first thing, if anybody's looking to go street to seat, first thing is to stop by your recruiter, Army recruiter. Now, be careful with the recruiters. Right now, the Army is a little bit under strength, so they're looking to recruit a lot of new recruits. And they'll try to sell you on, like, well, you should enlist first and, go from there. And, you have a really good chance of getting picked up as a warrant officer in the Army flight program. And that's true, but you can also just go straight to seat, as you already know. So just make sure that, for the recruiter, it's probably easier to get somebody to enlist, because applying for the warrant officer flight program is a lot more complex. There's a lot more paperwork and things that need to be submitted, things that need to happen and get checked off a checklist. So yeah, I would say start with your recruiter and get the ball rolling. Start studying for what they call the SIFT test, the Selection Instrument for Flight Training. I was one of the first people to take the SIFT test. It used to be called the AFAST, I think, and they replaced it with the SIFT. And the thing about the SIFT test is you get 2 tries to pass it, right? If you don't pass it on the second try, like, that's it. You can never be a pilot in the Army, ever. And if you pass it, whatever score you get, that's your score. You can't retake it. You can't try again to get a better score. At least this is how it was when I came through. So a lot of these things do change over time, but I believe that's still the case for the SIFT. It's been a few years since I've looked at that. But yeah, so I actually applied street to seat and didn't get accepted back in like 2012. It was like during the drawdown, I think. And I ended up enlisting, and then about a year later, I dropped another packet, and I got picked up. But when I dropped that packet from active duty, my SIFT score was still valid. I thought I was going to have to retake it, and they're like, nope, still good. So, it's good to go. So you definitely want to prepare your best for that. If you're not so good at math, just go on YouTube and just look up like math, finite math, and like basic algebra. I don't think I think I remember the math part was kind of like it adapted to you. So it asked me some algebra stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I remember that from high school. Yeah, x plus y, whatever. And then it started to get into like trig and calculus, and I was like, I don't remember any of that. And then it just stopped. It's like math part is done, So, but there weren't any study guides when I took it, so there's study guides now. So buy a SIF study guide and start looking through what kind of questions are on there. I would start looking through the first couple chapters of the FAA Helicopter Handbook. That's available for free on the FAA website. You can just Google FAA Helicopter Handbook. The first couple chapters of that will tell you a lot of the basic concepts that we have to deal with on a regular basis to fly a helicopter. So that's a really great piece of reading material that's available for free. If you want to go further in depth, there's something called the Fundamentals of Flight, TC 3-04.4, which is an Army publication that is available to the public, and anybody can go read that. You can look it up on the Army Publishing Directorate, and that's got all kinds of aerodynamic stuff that we teach at the flight school in the Army. So getting prepared for the SIF test is a big thing. Also getting yourself physically prepared. So you're going to want to start running a lot. Army likes running. So if you don't like running, then just go start liking to run, because you'll be doing a lot of it. And definitely get yourself in shape. The next thing you'd have to do after you pass the SIF test is get a flight physical. So make sure you're in good health is obviously pretty paramount to being a pilot. You can't have you having a stroke or anything, or having a seizure in the middle of a flight. So you can imagine that could be quite disastrous. So they'll do a pretty thorough scan and make sure you're fit to fly. But there are I know a lot of people who are like, well, I could never be an Army pilot because my vision is bad. I'm like 20/30 on my both eyes. Well, as far as I understand, as long as your vision is correctable to 20/20, meaning you can put some glasses on and you can see, I think even contacts are allowed, or PRK surgery, I believe, is allowed now. You'd have to do some research, but as long as they're correctable, you can get in. So there's also waivers for things. They might give you a waiver if you have some certain condition where it's like, okay, well, we'll make a we'll let it slide this time, and they'll put a little waiver in your records. So don't ever give up just because you think that maybe you don't qualify. But yeah, I think that's where to start, is to go to your recruiter, make sure that you make it clear that you are interested in becoming a warrant officer for the flight training program, and you want to start the packet. And if you definitely want to be a pilot, you want to go straight in as a pilot, make it clear to them, like, yeah, I'm not interested in enlisting right now. What I want to do is try to, for a board, put my packet up into a board, and that's what I want to do. You're going to need letters of recommendation. There's a lot to the packet, so the recruiter will show you how to get started. And there's even, let me see here. So I just Googled warrant officer flight training, and here, let me put this, here you go. I'm going to put this in the comments here. So recruiting.army.mil, that's where to get started for flight training, if you're curious. And that'll tell you everything you need to know. I would read that very in depth, all right? Being a warrant officer and being a pilot in general, both of those positions require extreme attention to detail, all right? And that's what the Warrant Officer Candidate School is all about. That'll teach you extreme attention to detail, and you can read all about that on the internet. But missing one little thing, right, in a long checklist with 1,000 items on it can result in disaster. And I've actually had a couple times where, one time in particular, where I missed a step on a checklist, and I ended up in severe icing conditions, completely IMC in a foreign country, and my blade de-ice failed in extreme icing conditions because I forgot this one step, and we ended up just relaxed. Okay, what's going on here? Calm down. Let's try to figure this out, and ended up finding the switch, and we figured it out, and we got it all worked out. But anyway, attention to detail is a really big thing in being a pilot or being a warrant officer. So if you are interested in getting started in this career, that website is something I would read pretty thoroughly. I would pretty much read every piece of that whole website, and that'll get you started. So, all right. Holy crap! There's a lot of questions here. All right. All right. What gear does Snak Pack use? I already talked about that a little bit. King Poopra just says landing. Not sure what. All right, Army Aviator, what boots am I rocking? Of course, I'm rocking the Rocky S2Vs. What kind of question is that? Why would I not be wearing the Rockies? Any tips for finding a reference point when doing hover, like 15-foot front area? So it really depends. If it's Clear Blue 22, if it's like day VFR and I'm trying to hover, I think the easiest place to look at is about 45 degrees on my side, whichever side I'm sitting on. I'll look about 45 degrees to my side, and I'll find a reference point, about 15 feet, somewhere around there, right? It could be anything, it could be a rock or a spot in the grass that's like brown and not green or whatever. Anything you can latch onto. Because a 45-degree angle, you can get an idea of your fore, aft, and lateral movement, right? But sometimes that's not really possible. If you hover over really tall, wavy grass, you get this illusion that's we call vection, and basically it's like your relative motion. You have this. Remember, in a helicopter, especially, you have this giant fan spinning around, and it's blowing all this air downwards, right? So as it does that, it's trying to kick up everything that's on the ground. It's moving. If there's tall, wavy grass, it's going to be blowing it like crazy. It's going to be flustering all about, right? And so as you look at this grass, you got to think like, as you're looking down, your entire field of view, other than what's in the cockpit, is just grass. And as you're blowing it all around, it's waving every which way. It can get really disorienting, and you might not even be able to hold a solid hover, And oftentimes you might think you are, and then somebody else is like, "Hey, dude, you're like drifting backwards right now. Are you tracking that?" So, definitely looking far out in front of you to maybe a tree line, and then looking out to the right and continuing to scan back and forth. If you're unable to use that little 15 foot to the 45, that's another way you can do it. So sometimes flying at night, I prefer to do it that way. It's a little bit harder, but it'll definitely keep you a lot more straight and in one spot. So looking forward for your lateral drift, and then looking out to the side for your fore and aft drift. Right. All right, John Cartwright. Yes, I think you got to look in the distance so you don't over control like driving a car. Let's see. Woohoo! Well, Army Flight School teach us about performing hammerhead turn and stuff in basic training. So, remember, basic training is where everybody goes to learn like rifle marksmanship and how to march in formation and stuff. But if you're talking about basic flight school training, they call that Common Core training right now. No, we don't do hammerhead turns, but you're gonna do all kinds of fun stuff. Don't worry about it if you ever get in there. But certain tactics, techniques for flying, really, you're not gonna learn until maybe later in your career. We just basically, the Army Flight School, we teach you how to fly your aircraft. We do some tactics and get everybody instrument rated and qualified in your aircraft, making sure how it works, all the ins and outs, what it's capable of, and how to employ it in as an Army pilot. But I've never really, I don't think I've ever even done a hammerhead turn. I've done like a corkscrew, do like a corkscrew into an LZ, which is really fun. You get to really bank it really hard. It's a lot of fun. But no, never done a hammerhead. Now that being said, there are some organizations within Army Aviation that do some swoopier stuff. All right, we call those the swoopy guys. If you've ever seen that movie Blackhawk Down, that was the 160th Special Forces Aviation Regiment. So they have a whole different set of I don't know anything about them because I've never been a part of it. But they have a whole different set of tactics, and I don't know, maybe they do hammerhead turns. I don't know. You'd have to make it up there and apply and get in to find out. So, all right. Yes, King Poopra, you definitely can get a pair of wings at the PX. Funny story about that. When I got out of flight school, I went to my first unit, and there was like an in processing place, right, where you spend like a week in processing at the new unit. And so I was just like a very junior warrant officer at the time, right, and just graduated flight school. And there was also a drone operator, and he was a enlisted guy, E2, and he was like a drone pilot. He had just graduated from his training, and he had the same wings that I had. And I was like, I think you're supposed to have the other, like the crew member wings. I don't know if you're supposed to have the pilot wings or not. You know, I just wasn't even really sure. And yeah, it turns out he was walking around with like the wrong wings on. He had the pilot wings on. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not the right thing you're supposed to be wearing. So we had to help that guy out a little bit. After 2 weeks, yeah. All right, Manny, does the Army teach you how to do barrel rolls in Blackhawk? So we're actually not authorized to do a barrel roll in a Blackhawk. However, a Blackhawk can do a barrel roll. It is. I think there's a video of it you can see. But yeah, I would really like to do one, but we're not allowed to. There are certain limitations that the operator's manual imposes on us, and it's actually an Army document, our operator's manual. So the Sikorsky has developed the S-70, right, and that's the civilian version of the Blackhawk. So in the Army we call it a UH-60, but the S-70 is actually what I have on my. I don't think I have my wallet around here. But that's actually what I have on my FAA pilot's license. Is that I'm commercial instrument rated in a S-70 rotorcraft. So yeah, I'm not sure what the civilian operator's manual says. I've never really looked at it, to be honest. But yeah, in the Army version of it, which it's not available to the public. But if you were to look in there, you would see there's some limitations, and a barrel roll is unfortunately beyond the limitations of what we're allowed to do. However, I guess I can't really imagine a situation where I would need to do that. But you know, limitations are for normal flight, and of course, any good pilot knows that, you know, if you need to break the rules in an emergency situation, you certainly can, right? As long as you can justify why you did that. But I'm trying to think. I don't really have any reason why I would have to do a barrel roll. But I'll tell you this: when I get new students in there, I'll put them in about like a 50-degree bank, and at first it feels like you're upside down. It's not like a simulator where you can just see your screen tilting like 50 degrees and you're like, oh wow, here we go. You know, once you feel all the G forces and you feel your vestibular system, which is your little inner ear organs. If you close your eyes and you move your head around, you can feel your vestibular system working, and you can get a little disoriented. But yeah, when you're in the real aircraft for the first time, when you do like a steep bank and yank back on the cyclic a little bit, and you know, start adding some G forces, it's a wild ride. So you really don't need to do a barrel roll to get any kind of satisfaction out of flying. Let's see. How do you pop a Snak who? I guess am I Big Daddy Snack Pack or Papa Snack Pack now? This is great. I love my new names. What would you rather see replace the Hawk, the Defiant or the V280 Valor? I'm not gonna lie, I get these mixed up. Hang on. Is the V280? Yeah, screw that V280. I want the Defiant. Defiant X helicopter. Yeah, I want the Defiant. Man, that thing's got that big tail rotor on the back, the big tail fan. That thing looks badass. So you'll see. This is actually a good question for the people who don't know. Helicopters have a natural limitation that you can't really break, right, for airspeed. Somebody asked me this question in one of my videos, and they were talking about the advancing and the retreating halves of the rotor disc. Well, as you're flying into the wind, you think the rotor's spinning one way. Well, part of that is advancing into the wind that you're flying into, and part of it is retreating away, right? So at a certain airspeed, essentially what happens is your forward airspeed is greater than the speed that that retreating blade is cutting through the air backwards. And so that's something we call retreating blade stall, and every helicopter essentially is susceptible to that. But that Defiant has a coaxial rotor system, which is not a new development. There's I think there's a Russian helicopter. Russian helicopters have the same thing. There's a couple other ones that have that idea. So you essentially, each disc would hit retreating blade stall at the same time, and it would kind of cancel each other out. But that also negates the necessity for a tail rotor. I guess you just apply torque on one of the rotors, or have them apply torque in the opposite direction. I'm trying to think about, if I was an engineer, how I'd work that math out. But you don't really need a tail rotor anymore. So instead, they put this big ass fan on the back, and it looks cool as hell. And so now we've eliminated retreating blade stall, and now that thing can fly. I've read varying numbers, but I think like a upper 200 knots, which is hauling ass. I mean, you'd be going that'd be insane. So I would love to fly one of those. I think the Valor, the V280, just, I don't know. I've heard so many bad things about the Ospreys, and it just, I don't know, kind of worries me a little bit. But I think that would be cool too, because I mean, as someone who also flies fixed wing, that would be a really cool transition. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think I would go for the Defiant. Imagine this: an Amazon drone delivering packages to Mother Rucker. All right, I'm interested in making a career out of flying Blackhawks. Do you have any advice? Well, Braden Hiram, not sure if I'm saying that right, man. But I think the easiest way to do that would be through the U.S. Army. Now, there are civilian agencies that have Blackhawks as well. In California, they have the Firehawks, but I know they require a lot more. You got to have a lot of time to be able to get that job. You got to have a lot of rotor time, a lot of Blackhawk time. So, if you want to fly Blackhawks in particular, you got to imagine they're thousands of dollars per flight hour. So, just to operate, right, between fuel and maintenance and everything. So, paying for that on your own, you'd have to be like a millionaire to be able to pay for your own training, So definitely going through the service of some sort is probably the way to go. So the Army has Blackhawks, also the Air Force and the Navy. The Navy has the Seahawk, the Air Force has the Pavehawk, and then the Coast Guard has their version of the Blackhawk. I think maybe they fly the Seahawk too. I'm not really sure. But all the services in the U.S. have Blackhawks. I don't know about the Marines. I'm not sure if they do or not. You'd have to ask, but I don't think they do. Yeah, like I said, I was just talking about how to do that in the Army. If you want to go street to seat, how to go start with your recruiter and get ready for the SIF test. That's probably the way to go. Yeah, I think that's kind of like your options, is to join the U.S. military, and they'll train you up. Let's see. What got you into flying? What's the full resume for Snak Pack? So I actually wanted to be a pilot since I was a little kid, and I got into music in high school, and then I ended up going to school for music, and became a musician for a little while, and then I just I didn't really like the music industry. Once I got into it, I realized that it really wasn't for me. I liked doing it as a hobby, and I didn't really want to do it anymore as a career. So I kind of reverted back to flying. But ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to fly. I wanted to be in the Air Force and fly fighter jets and stuff. So I was 5, 6 years old. I had a little book, and I could identify an F-14 from an F-16. I knew, I was just a little nerd about it. But yeah, I guess it's kind of something I always wanted to do. And the Army was a really great place to get started, because they believe it or not, most people don't know this, but the Army has more aircraft than the Air Force. So we need the most pilots in the Army. So it's definitely a more approachable place to get in. Whereas the Air Force, I believe they still require a 4-year degree to become a pilot in the Air Force. And I believe that's true for the Navy as well. I'd have to double check. But in the Army, you don't need any college. Don't need any college at all. You can, in fact, you can graduate high school and you can go straight into becoming a pilot. So when I was in the Warrant Officer Candidate School, I was already in my 30s at the time, and this is what you go through first. So if you were to go street to seat, you would go to basic training first, and then they would send you to the Warrant Officer Candidate School, where you become a warrant officer. And after that, there's a few other classes you got to do. You got to do the survival school, which there's all kinds of fun stuff written about that, which some of it's maybe not necessarily true, but it's classified, so you can't really talk about it. But it's definitely, that's an experience. But you do survival school, and then you do flight school, and then you finally get to your unit. All that takes about 2 years to get through it all. But what was I saying here? I totally lost my train of thought. I went off on a tangent. I don't even remember what I was saying. What was that? Yeah, what got you into flying? Okay. Well, hopefully I got to your answer somewhere. I don't even know where I was going with that. But all right, let's skip over to Ryan W. It would be interesting to see you and CW Lemoyne do a Q&A together. Former fighter pilot who's been getting his help rating recently. Oh, helo rating, I guess. He's been testing the Puma controls. Yeah, that's yeah, I'll check that dude out. Jesse Holmes, I see helicopters that seem to be flying lower than airplanes. Why is that? Is it not safe to fly helicopters high like a plane? No, you can fly helicopters at the same altitudes as. Let me see how I want to phrase this. You can fly helicopters low, or you can fly them high, right? Helicopters can typically fly much lower than airplanes on a normal basis, and that's because in the event of an engine failure, we have ways to get down on the ground, right, safely. An airplane requires forward airspeed in order to land, right? So even like a small Cessna, you got to be doing at least like 60 knots, which is like it's probably close to like 70 miles per hour. You've got to be going pretty fast to come in and land that thing, or else the wings are not going to generate enough lift. All right, and you're gonna what's gonna happen is the wing is gonna stall, right? We talk about stalls in like an engine, right? And like your car, oh, my car's stalling out. It's a little bit different than that. When we talk about a stall for a wing, we're talking about the wings going through the air, but there's not enough dynamic and static pressure differential on the top and bottom of the wing to generate lift, right? So I'm getting a little advanced here, but essentially you need forward airspeed to land a airplane. But a helicopter, you don't. You can just come straight down, right? Because essentially the rotor disc, the blades on the rotor disc are continuously spinning, and they are always in forward flight. Even if you're at a hover, the rotor blades think that they're going forward, right? Because of that circular motion, right? They're continuously cutting into the wind with a lot of power behind them, and it's generating that lift, right? As soon as you pull up on the collective stick, all the blades, the pitch of all the blades starts going up, and then the engines start working harder to make sure they don't drag, and they generate that lift. So yeah, helicopters are better apt to flying low. If you have a single engine failure in an aircraft, right, or a complete engine failure, you need to start gliding, and you need to immediately find a place to set it down, like in some open field. So they teach you the ABCs in fixed wing. Right, engine failure, ABCs. Airspeed. What's my best glide airspeed? Usually it's about 65 knots for like a Cessna 172, if I recall. So immediately get to that airspeed. B is for best place to land. What's the best place to land around here? All right, cool. And then C, checklist, right? Get the checklist out, try to get that engine restarted. But the first thing you do is get to that best glide airspeed so that you have the best chance, you have the most time to react and figure out what the hell you're going to do, and instead of just falling out of the sky, right? So yeah, good question to Jesse. It's also a cool thing about helicopters is that we get to fly low a lot of times. You have to really dig into the FAR to learn about how you can fly low legally. But especially in the armed forces, if you're flying helicopters, a lot of times you'll see restricted areas on a VFR sectional map, right? And a lot of times those are just dedicated to military training, and we can go into there and we can fly right above the treetops, which is like super fun, super cool. All right, CW rules. I gotta figure out who the CW guy is. I don't even know who he is. CW Le Mans. Going through Army flight school for the 60 mic, I hated when the IPs made me do random auto rotations. Kamsule Adi. Hi there. Do flight sims help in helicopter training? I was assigned to fly on the Blackhawk in about 1 year and was wondering if I could head start the learning process. Absolutely, you can. So what you need to do is figure out if you're supposed to be flying Limas or Mikes. If you're flying the or some other variant. If you're flying the Lima model, I would definitely get the one in DCS. If you're flying the Mike model, there's a really good one in Aerofly FS4. It's pretty good. The flight director still needs a little work, and I know they're still working on it, but it's pretty accurate to where you're at. Now, I'll tell you this: flying in VR in these headsets or in these simulators, it looks like you're right there in the cockpit. I mean, especially that 60 Lima, like that dude did an amazing job on that. It's a little too good, actually. So, but you're gonna get you're not gonna get the proprioceptive feel, right? Or not the proprioceptive, the vestibular feel, like I was talking about earlier with the inner ear, how it actually feels and how it feels on the seat of your pants. The proprioceptive feeling of flying a helicopter. So that's something that you're only gonna get in the real aircraft. Even in the really advanced simulators that we use for training. They still don't fly like the real helicopter. They're really great for certain things. So certain things like instrument flight. All right, simulators are amazing for instrument flight. Also for responding to emergencies, they're awesome, right? And general, just figuring out where everything is in your cockpit, where the switches are, doing a startup, right? Starting up an advanced aircraft like a Blackhawk or even like a 747. There's a very extensive checklist you have to go through, and there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of checks you need to do. There's a lot of stuff you need to know about the what engine parameters you're looking for at certain times, right? What caution lights and advisories you're looking for at certain times during the run-up sequence. So, when I have students out there, it's like their first time trying to start up a Blackhawk. It'll take them like an hour, and I'm just sitting there like, okay. Here we go. Like they're like, where is this switch? Sort of looking. I can't remember where the hydraulic switch is. And then they eventually find it, and I just have to sit there and be patient. And it's just what it is. But simulators are definitely really good for stuff like that. Getting used to your cockpit. And the flying part, everybody gets it. Like eventually. Some people it takes a little longer than others, and it's nothing to stress about. I guess there are a couple people who I've flown with who are just not really good even after a few years, but most people get it. You eventually figure out how to control the helicopter or the airplane, whatever you're training on. So I step away in 1 second for let's see here. What is the best duty for a candidate during what? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over a few guys here. Facts. Let's see. Cletus started Common Core last week. It's a hell of a process, but it's worth it. Yeah. It's definitely an adventure. But that first flight is like, it makes it all worth it. Like, oh man, I'm finally here. Rob H. My son asked about flying career for Blackhawks. He has the opportunity to get ACEL PPL that spring. Do you think this would be helpful if he got PPL before applying for Warrant Officer? So yes and no, and here's why I say that. I think that having any kind of flight training before you go to flight school is going to benefit you, right? It's going to help, and it'll make things easier. However, that being said, most of the people that come through there have no training whatsoever. And they might know that the spinny thing goes on top and it shouldn't be on the bottom, and that's kind of like baseline. We got to start them from scratch, and that's okay, right? And most people get through just fine. You definitely got to do a lot of work, right? There's a lot of it's a hard work. It's not supposed to be easy, but there's definitely a lot of work that goes into it. However, I think having a fixed wing PPL before you go would help with a lot of stuff and make things a lot easier. But the Army also has some incentive programs. So there's a thing called certification assistance where you can actually get free money towards getting those certifications once you're already in. So there's a lot of folks here in flight school who actually do that for free. They're going to like a civilian flight school and they're getting that training. It's one of the benefits that they get as an active duty or reserve or guard service member, and they're getting that benefit and they're going to get it while they're here in flight school. So I would say if you have the money to burn, and it's probably going to cost definitely more than $10,000, somewhere between 10 and 20 grand for an entry level pilot to get a PPL. It's going to be somewhere between 10 and 20 grand, I think. That would be a good estimate. You could get a closer estimate if you find a flight school that does that, that sort of thing. But yeah, if you got the money to burn, then sure, you can go for it and make your life a little easier. But other than that, I would say it's not super worth it because he'll definitely learn all that stuff in flight school, and you won't have to pay for it. Jesse Holmes. What is the best duty for a candidate during walks, in your opinion? Well, I would say the song officer, but they don't do that anymore. So, all right. Funny guy make you laugh. Did you hear about the plastic surgeon that hung himself? I did not. All right. What's a Hammerhead turn? Yeah, there you go. KA52. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, with the tandem, the coaxial rotor disc. Thoughts on 160th? Well, no official thoughts. Exquisite Squid 4. I guess there's 3 other Exquisite Squids already, and you had to be number 4. That's amusing. Yeah, the 160th, they're a bunch of cool dudes. Yeah, don't know much about them. It's you can definitely read. There's some really great book by Mike Durant. A couple of great books by Mike Durant. He was the pilot who got captured during the raid in Somalia in Mogadishu, which is basically the plot of Blackhawk Down. It was, I believe, his Blackhawk was the first to go down, and he got captured by some of the gangs over there in Mogadishu that they were trying to settle down. But Mike Durant has some really good books out. You can read. There's one that's called The Night Stalkers that has some super cool stories in there, and yeah, I would also some really hard stories. There's also a really cool article that came out. I can't remember his name. There's a CW5 who's like one of the lead planners for the 160th, and he released this article about the Bin Laden raid, and there's a lot of stuff in there where I was like, wow, I was like surprised that that was allowed to be made public. But super cool article if you look that up. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was really fun to read. So yeah, the 160th does a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, I hear that getting selected is very tough. You definitely have to be at the top of your game to get into there, and yeah, they stay busy. I'll tell you that. They got a lot of stuff to do. Alligator Black Shark, thanks. Would you ever fly in private military group? Swank, I'm not sure what you're asking there. I don't think there's really any private military. You talking about like a militia? You part as a militia? I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. Do helicopter pilots use SIDs and stars? So you can use a SID. This is from Scott Nathan. Yeah, you can. We do use standard instrument departures if they're available, but stars generally not. Right? Generally, helicopters don't fly too high. We can. I've had a Black Hawk at like 13,000 feet before. It's about as high as I got. And you got to start thinking about hypoxia at that altitude. But yeah, I've never done a star procedure. But definitely do SIDS a lot. There's not a lot. Whenever they're available, if you need to do a SID, then we can definitely request that. It all depends on what equipment the aircraft has, right? So there's helicopters. I know that like if you get into Microsoft Flight Simulator, you'll see that there is a Bell 407 that has a Garmin GPS, right? So that's totally capable of doing a standard instrument departure procedure. And really any instrument approaches, you just got to kind of hand fly it, right? Which makes instruments a little bit trickier. But yeah, you can look in there's a free Airbus 135 that you can download from flightsim.to. And that one is coupleable. I haven't messed with it too much, but you can basically make it do what you want and put in autopilot there, and then yeah, you can load. If you have a good Garmin, you can load approaches in there, and the helicopters will just fly them for you, right? If they have advanced enough systems, So it just depends. U.S. Coast Guard fly Jayhawk. Yeah, the Jayhawk. That's what I was thinking of in the Coast Guard. Yeah, thanks, Barkaz. Yeah. Coast Guard sounds a little more chill than being in the Army. You got to think when you join the Army, there's pros and cons to every branch. All right. So one of the things about the Army is that yeah, you can become a pilot, and yeah, it's like, oh man, I'm a pilot, right? You get this big ego boost, I guess. But then they tell you, hey, we're leaving, and we're going to be going and living in a tent for 3 weeks. All right, so pack your stuff, and you'll be sleeping on a cot, living in a tent for 3 weeks, and doing training and stuff. So it's just like all the same thing the infantry guys have to do. Not the same stuff. Don't let me. I'm gonna get annihilated for saying that, but some of the same things that the infantry has to do. Some of them, as a pilot, you have to do the same kind of thing, and definitely stay busy. But Coast Guard, yeah, Coast Guard sounds cool. I'd be up for checking that out and see what the day-to-day life is like for being a Jayhawk pilot in the Coast Guard. Let's see. Swank iRacing aced all my testing for rotorcraft, failed the color vision lantern test. That's a bummer, dude. Yeah, I actually just barely pass the depth perception test every year. Like I just barely pass because my left eye is like a little less. It's like 20/25 on average, but I can squeak by, get 20/20 on it. But I think my binocular vision doesn't work as well. But I feel like everybody fails the depth perception test, or not fails, but it's just hard to do well on it. All right, a YouTuber. This is Manny. He said a YouTuber called Heavy D Sparks bought a private Blackhawk. Quite cool to see it being used for private use. I saw that guy. Yeah, and I think he's got a video where he failed a check ride or something. But yeah, it looks cool. Yeah, if you got, I mean, if I had the money to buy a Blackhawk, I probably would. But they're very expensive to fly, so I'm not sure I would even buy one, even if I was a multimillionaire. Coyote UH-60 Aviator. Oh, did the Army do any updates to the spindles, control links? Okay, I think he's asking. Yeah, I'm not going to get into any specific. I don't know if he's asking the other guy or me, but won't get into any specifics about any aircraft components. Let's see. Alan Davis, you retracted your message. Bro, we all want to know what you said, Alan. We all want to know what you said. Retype your question, Alan. All right. I would love to be your student. I would love for you to be my student, Howitzer. All right. Thanks for the show, broski. Still active duty. You mentioned working towards CFI ratings. Where are you located? Yeah, I'm still on active duty. So I guess I can take my military equivalent to. I just have to do the written test and get CFI and CFII, but I'm working on that on fixed wing as well. So I've got my PPL on fixed wing, and then so I'm just trying to figure out what I need to do to get. I know I got to get instrument and then commercial, and I think I can do those in like the same check ride. I think now that I have the PPL for fixed wing, I think I only need like maybe 10 or 20 hours of training, and then I can go knock that check ride out. And then to get CFI and CFII on fixed wing, I got to figure out what I need to do. I need to get into the FAR and read all the little fine print, but that's something I'm looking to have done in the next year or so. Is get CFI. Do you have fellow Army pilots that fly with glasses or contacts? I'm debating whether to get corrective surgery. The answer is yes. I can't remember about contacts, if they're allowed or not. I don't need contacts, but I think you can fly with contacts. Definitely can fly with glasses, and you can definitely get PRK surgery. I believe it's PRK. So you just have to look. You can check out that website I posted. It'd probably have some more information about that. But yeah, I know some of my students have had PRK, I believe, and that's acceptable now. It didn't used to be. It used to be like a no-go, but I think they've decided that it's it's good enough for normal use. It's successful, has a success rate high enough to where it's not going to mess anybody's eyes up or whatever. But kind of scary. I think they like while you're awake, they like scrape your eye with something, or I don't know. I would not want to do that, but who knows, But I think they give you some good drugs or something, so you don't really care that they're scraping your eye away or something. But that's just what I've heard. I'm definitely not a doctor, not qualified to even be talking about it. However, yes, some to answer your question, some I do know fellow pilots who fly with glasses for sure. Let's see. Do you think you'll be making any more flight simulator video? Yeah, I'm going to be making a ton more. I'm trying to make this a really diverse, my YouTube channel really diverse. I was hoping to get a lot more. I've got a lot of simmers who have been watching my stuff and commenting, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I play DCS. I love DCS," and that's awesome. But I'm trying to get like a more diverse audience and hopefully get more like people who are interested in either becoming a pilot or in training and just need some help with certain things. So I'm really trying to use the flight simulators as a teaching tool because I can't really get into a Blackhawk and have a recording device and everything in there. It's not really allowed. So I can't really do it from the real aircraft. And then I guess I could just make some videos of me just sitting here telling you things. But being in the flight simulator, I can show you exactly how everything works. I can get into Microsoft Flight Simulator in the Bell 407 and turn on the fluid dynamics where you can actually see the air passing through the rotor system and how it changes as you manipulate the flight controls and all that. So yeah, I'm definitely I'm planning on doing a lot more. I'm looking to do at least a video a week, maybe two, on a range of topics. And if you go to the community page on my YouTube channel, you can see I put up a post about listing some of the things I'm planning for in the future. But yeah, by all means, if you have suggestions of specific things you'd like to see, then go ahead and make a suggestion. I'll try to work it in. Have you ever heard of Arma 3 and or the Hatchet 60 mod? I have heard of this, and I saw some videos on it, and it looks pretty awesome. I've got, like I said, I got my whole hard drive, I have a terabyte hard drive almost completely taken up with flight simulator stuff, so I think I need to just get a new, I got to get like a 3 terabyte hard drive or something, but I don't even think I have enough room to get Arma on there right now. But it is something I am planning on checking out in the future. And maybe one day I'd like to do like a comparison video of all the different Blackhawks that are available for different flight simulators. There's one that there's a guy working on for in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think Microsoft Flight Simulator is the best just because the visuals are awesome and the cockpits so far are great, and it's the whole planet. Like, it's just insane. You can fly anywhere, and it's all in 3D, and it looks like remarkably like real life. And that's super cool to me, to be able to fly from one airport to another and, do all the instrument approaches and stuff like that. So I'm really hoping that there's that Blackhawk that's in development. It's a work in progress. You can download it from flightsim.to. And it's looking really good for where it's at, but it definitely, I hope they continue working on that thing. I would pay $100 to have that thing fully functional in Microsoft Flight Simulator, because that would be like the main source of flight instruction I'd be doing if I could get that. But we'll see what happens in the future. I was just going to ask for a video of your settings in Microsoft Flight Sim for VR. Yeah, you're having bad stutters, Alan. Hey, there's Alan. There's your question. Hey, thanks for posting that, Alan. Yeah, man. I got everything like on pretty much ultra, just because I spent basically an irresponsible amount of money on this PC. So I'm running everything on ultra. I do use the OpenXR toolkit that seems to give you a few more FPS in VR, but I think I got a couple things turned down just a little bit, but pretty much everything's on ultra. And I guess I know I was getting like 40 frames per second with one current setup I had going. I was just continuing to tweak things here and there, but I'm not the guy to ask on that. There's definitely some really smart people out there on YouTube who are like blow my mind. I'm just like trying to learn how to set my stuff up as well as they do, but it's just like really in depth. There's a lot to go into it. Let's see. You can do both at the same time at 250 hours. The ATP is 800 hours. Okay, I guess you guys are talking to each other. Yeah, you guys stop talking to each other. This is my no, I'm just kidding. All right, I'm in the reserves and I'm an E3 going for E4. This is neighborhood P going for E4, and I'm able to take the SIF test. But what are the requirements though? So there's no requirements as far as I understand to take the SIF test. I believe you need a GT score of 110. I think that's the minimum GT score that they'll allow you to have to take the SIF test. So the good news is if you don't have a GT score of 110, if you go to the education center at your base or the closest base to you, they have free kind of like, it's kind of like I've never been to it, but it's kind of like a study hall kind of deal. And there's people who will help work with you on like math and algebra and stuff like that, and reading comprehension, I don't know, whatever it is, to help get your GT score up. So you can always do that and then retake your, what was that called, the ASVAB? I guess you kind of retake the ASVAB, or I'm not really sure, but the education center would be your resource. They will be able to talk to you about that if your GT score is not up. But aside from that, you might need like a letter from your commander. But any education center should, in theory, be able to administer the SIF test. And yeah, I would just hit up the closest one to you. If you said you're in the reserves, so I'm not sure where the closest like big base to you is, but contacting their education center is going to be your point of reference for that. And then yeah, as long as you have the GT score and then whatever else they tell you, maybe it's a letter from the commander, I don't know, but you should be able to just go in there and take it. Now I would caution you, right? Remember, at SIF test, you get 2 tries, and if you just barely pass on the first try, that grade, that's what you got, and you can never retake it. So I would definitely prepare for that as best as you can before you go in. Let's see. Tyson Ransom says, hey, how do you connect your Bose headset to your PC? So I talked about that when I was going over my PC setup. So just whenever we're done with this, you can just watch the video in the earlier parts, and you can see my whole setup, and it shows I show how I hook it up. But it's just a little adapter. And how was Fort Rucker for flight school? I actually graduated from there as a 15 Papa. Love me some 15 Papas. You guys make the world go round. It's it's Fort Rucker. It's soon to be renamed. I believe it's officially going to be called Fort Novacell now. I think they made that official, and that's coming up here. I think in a few weeks they're going to change the name. I'm not sure. You have to look it up. But Fort Rucker's, there's not much there. It's not like a bustling metropolis of of a city, but it's nice. I mean, Fort Rucker's not so bad. If you go there as a pilot, you actually can get into like company grade officer housing, so you can get like a whole. They have like some duplexes, and then they have like single family homes that are like 3-4 bedroom houses that they'll you can live on post, or you can live off post, and do whatever you want. But yeah, flight schools. It's the fact that there's not a lot to do around Fort Rucker is a good thing, because flight school is very involved. It takes a lot of time and effort because you go to your flight training every day, but then there's also academic classes, and then you finish all that stuff and you're like worn out. Well, now you got to study because you have all this stuff to prepare for the next day. And then, oh yeah, don't forget, you need to probably go for a run because you got a physical fitness test coming up, and so you got to keep yourself in shape, and you're always studying, always learning new stuff. and they give you so much information in such a short amount of time. You got to think like people get a 4-year degree from Embry-Riddle, and we compress all that into like a year. So you learn a lot of stuff really fast. But if there's one thing that the Army's really good at, it's training. The Army has figured out training. Some of it can seem tedious, but we figured out how to get people trained up and efficiently. So let's see. Thanks for all the info. What made you go 60s specifically? The Exquisite Squid 4 asks. I really when you decide what aircraft you want to fly, first of all, there's a selection process, at least in the Army. So if you get selected to become a warrant officer, or even like say a lieutenant or a captain, you get into the aviation branch, there is a order of merit list. So it basically takes all of your grades, your check ride grades, and all of your academic test grades, and you'll end up somewhere on a list. And then when it goes to the selection day, they'll say, hey, these are the aircraft that we have, so many Blackhawks available to pick, so many Apaches ready to pick, Chinooks, whatever. There's some fixed wing aircraft in there, and then you go in, and then it's like, okay, who's first on the list? Who did the best? Who has the highest test scores and all that? And it's like you get to pick first. So you might want to fly. You might really want to fly Apaches, and then you get to selection day, and you're like last on the list, and all the Apaches get taken up, and you're like, crap, now I gotta fly Chinooks or something, something else. So, but for me, I did choose Blackhawks at my selection because I just really like the mission set, and that's really what you need to think about if this is something that you're getting into and you're deciding which aircraft you want to pick. Should you have your choice, you really want to think about the mission set. So I think Apaches are badass. I would love to fly one day, and I would love to launch a Hellfire missile or whatever. That'd be insane, but on a regular basis, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a utility helicopter. So Blackhawk can do so many different things, and every day is different, whereas with the Apaches, it's like, okay, your mission set is to go blow stuff up, go kill the enemy. And that's also, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's awesome, but they also have to be really careful about ROE. So it gets complicated, but anyway, I really like the Blackhawk. I think just being a light utility or medium utility helicopter had the best mission set for me. And like I've never done medevac, but if I ever went to a medevac company, I think that would be awesome, to go and do medevac. But also, troop transport, air assaults, doing Bambi buckets, right? Like putting out fires with a bucket full of water, like it's just awesome. What a Blackhawk can do is just what really drove me to want to be a Blackhawk pilot. So let's see. Thanks for all the info. Let's see. Justin Filson says, I was a bang bang. Love me some 11 bang bangs. Had PRK. Is the way to go. They told us in the info portion that the non-PRK makes a flap and had problem with air jumpers and flat brake. Oh, okay. PRK has no flight or jump limits. Nice. So it looks like a lot of you guys are kind of sharing some information about PRK. That's good because I don't really know much about it. Thanks, Rob H. I appreciate it. Wildest thing I've ever seen while I was a pilot. Great question from Pie Hash. There's a number of things. Let's see, the wildest thing I've ever seen. I'll tell you, my second flight in a Blackhawk when I was in training, I hit a bird. It came up from below. We try our best to avoid them, not necessarily because we love animals, but we're not supposed to kill animals, but also because they can damage the aircraft. So really try not to hit birds. But this one came up from underneath, and it hit the nose of the helicopter first, right? And I didn't even know. My instructor didn't know either. It hit the nose, and then it came up and just exploded all over the windscreen, and then the rest of it went up into the rotor system. and it didn't break anything, which was great because if if it breaks something, they've been known to come through windshields before and like break the windshield open and potentially hit an instructor pilot and knock them out unconscious. All right, this has happened before, and the student pilot is now like the pilot. They're the pilot in command now because instructor pilot is unconscious and has like a turkey leg sticking out of his cheek or something. And it's like these turkey vultures is what I mean. So not a turkey leg, but a turkey vulture leg. And so anyway, yeah, I hit this bird and fortunately didn't break anything. But it's really funny because in a Blackhawk, it's super loud. All right, these helicopters are really loud, as you can imagine. They're incredibly loud, and so you have to have significant ear protection on, or else you're going to go deaf after time, and you won't be able to hear anybody else. So I didn't actually hear the bird hit. Whereas, like if you're driving a car and you're doing 70 miles an hour down the highway and a bird hits your windshield, like you're going to hear it. But I didn't hear it. I just saw it. So we're just flying along, fat, dumb, and happy, and then all of a sudden, there's just this explosion of bird parts all over my windscreen, and yeah, felt kind of bad. We took it back home and landed and shut it down, and the maintenance guys, I was like, hey, you want me to help like scrape this off for you or whatever? And they're like, nah, we'll get it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just grab my stuff and be on my way then, and I left. But so I felt kind of bad for those guys. I guess something I wasn't allowed to help for some I don't know, some contract maintenance thing. But anyways, yeah. Let's see. Somebody just asked, can birds damage the blades or the tail rotor? Absolutely, they can. Yeah, I mean anything can damage the rotors if it hits them. But that's just with any helicopter. You don't want any of your blades hitting anything. But you'd be surprised. Helicopters can take a lot. The blades can take quite a bit. There is a video, in fact, of the filming for one of the Fast and Furious movies. I'm not a big fan of those, but I guess there was one that had a Blackhawk that was like chained to a car in some chase sequence or whatever. And I saw during the filming, the stunt pilot who was flying that real Blackhawk came up over this ridge and clipped his rotor disc on a tree. And you can see footage of it. Like they let the footage go. They released the footage of that helicopter clipping that tree. And it turned out it was, after they landed, they checked it out, and it turned out no damage came from that. But I guess the pilot's ego was crushed pretty bad. So, it is what it is. But in your opinion, let's see, Exquisite Squid 4 asks, in your opinion, what's the hardest part physically about flying? I think just getting the feel for flying a helicopter at first is challenging for most people. And as I was saying earlier, I think I was talking about people over-controlling, the tendency is to over-control. So, we're drifting a little this way, and people slam in the cyclic on that way, and then we're kind of jerking all around, and just trying to develop some finesse with the flight controls at first can be a little bit challenging. But yeah, that, and then fatigue after a while. Flying for long periods of time you can get fatigued a little bit, especially it depends on what you're doing. So like for instance, let's say a international flight. Those pilots, I've never flown in an airline, so I can't really speak from experience on this, but I would assume that being a pilot in an airliner and flying across the Atlantic to Europe, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to take off, you get all your clearances and everything, you take off, and then you push the autopilot button and you just chill. And then one of them probably go take a nap, and then they'll swap out, And so I think it's less difficult to get fatigued in that scenario. But imagine this. Imagine that you are a student and we're in a traffic pattern just doing loop-de-loops. And on every pattern, I start messing with the helicopter. I pull an engine off on you, and you have to figure out how you're going to get it back on the ground safely. Or I turn off all the assists, so to speak, right? In Microsoft Flight Simulator, there's little assists you can turn on in the settings. Well, a lot of modern helicopters have assists as well, right? That work in real life, So if I turn those off and now you're back to flying it like like an unassisted helicopter, that's going to take a lot more finesse with those flight controls, and it's going to wear you out mentally and physically. And so after doing that for an hour, circle after circle of different issues, that I start messing with things and seeing how you're going to respond. It can get fatiguing, but you'd be surprised. You do that for an hour, hour and a half, and you're like, oh man. And then a year later, you're flying for like 7 hours in a row. Just like, and it's but again, if you're doing like some other mission, or you're just flying cross country somewhere, it's not really a whole lot going on, right? You're just monitoring, making sure everything's, all your instruments are good, cross-checking the other guy, making sure he's doing his job, and you're just flying. Especially if you have an aircraft that has autopilot, it's coupleable. You just boop boop boop, you just set that thing up and let it do its thing, and you're just kind of sitting back and watching, making sure you're kind of like the systems manager at that point. You're making sure everything's working correctly, talking to air traffic control, making sure they're doing their thing. That's another thing that can get really overwhelming for novice pilots, is that you have more than one radio, and they're tuned up to different frequencies, and so there could be multiple people talking at the same time. It's all coming into your ears, and so now not only are you trying to figure out what the heck to do, because one of our engines just got pulled offline, and now we got to get to the ground safely, but we still have to stay in this traffic pattern, and there's all these people yelling at me in my ears, and it's just like, stop, everybody shut up. So it takes a little while to get used to, but you get used to it after time for sure. Let's see, William Arnotts says, would you fly Apache on DCS? Yes, I would, but I think I have to pay like $60 for that thing, man. So I don't know. We'll see. I saw there's another guy who is like, I guess he used to be an Apache pilot, and he's got a YouTube channel where he does some crazy Apache stuff. So yeah, I think he's already got the market cornered on that one. So I'm not sure if I'll ever be doing anything like that. Maybe I'll try it out. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, Josh Burns 333. I guess there's 332 Josh Burns, and you were just the unlucky guy who got 333. Says, I'm trying to get into ground school for civilians. Got denied because I used to smoke weed, but I'm in a monitoring program now to get through that. Okay, well, that's good, man. Yeah, drugs are bad, okay? Yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you on that, man. Hopefully you got off the stinky stuff, and I don't know what to say, but yeah, you should be able to. It's a civilian school, and they, just because you smoked weed in the past, they won't let you in. I've never really heard of that. Usually, get into ground school for civilians. Yeah, I'm not sure what ground school you're trying to get into, but I did a civilian flight school for my PPL, and they didn't ask me if I had ever smoked weed or not, so I'm not. Yeah. Yeah, just try to stay away from that stuff. Let's see, bird versus bird. Blackhawk wins. Yes, indeed it did. That day. Okay, Kamsule Adi says, would you advise investing in a good active noise canceling headset early in your pilot career? Yeah, absolutely. If you can afford it, this Bose A20, it's awesome. All right, it is not cheap. It was not cheap, but it's pretty awesome. And one of the great features about it is that it has Bluetooth. I hope Bose is gonna like start sponsoring me to start telling you guys about how awesome their headsets are. But the noise canceling works great. All right, actually, I think my dogs were barking earlier, and I could like barely hear it, so they're just going ape shit in the other room, and I'm good to go over here. But yeah, the Bose A20 is pretty awesome. It has Bluetooth functionality, and I know there's a lot of other headsets that have Bluetooth functionality. But let me see if I can show you. It's got like this little controller here that you can clip to your leg, and you can adjust the volume in each of your ears. You can adjust your Bluetooth volume. There's a couple other little settings on there. The great thing about having Bluetooth on your headset is that you can make phone calls, and so you can call 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF, or you can call, so you can get weather information. You can call and open up flight plans, which if you have ForeFlight, that's a way easier way to do it anyway. But you can also call ATIS phone numbers. So let's say you're flying in a little Cessna and you only have one VHF radio, right? And let's say you have that on flight following, your flight doing like VFR flight following, right? And you're getting close to your destination and you want to get the weather information. And it's like, man, well, I guess I got to off tune this, and it's a pain in the ass. You got to call ATC, say, hey, I'm going to off tune temporarily to get the weather. And like, yeah, roger that. And you're changing all this stuff. And maybe you're the only pilot and you're like trying to fly and do all this stuff at once. Well, what you could also do is just set up, if you know your destination before you leave, which you should, save the AWAS or the ASOS or ATIS phone number into your favorites, right? And you can even do it from your iPad. Connect to Bluetooth. You can just dial that number. If you're flying along, you can still be up flight following with air traffic control on your Victor radio, and then you can listen to the weather information at your destination airport. You can get it that way, and it saves you a lot of time. So I guess it's like a minor convenience, but definitely having Bluetooth in a headset is awesome to have, right? Especially if you're limited on radios in your cockpit. And then, if it's a long cross country, you can put on your jams, right, and listen to whatever music you want. So it's pretty cool. Let's see. First time, this is Justin Filson. First time in a CH-47, we were landing and caught a tailwind. Right tire caught the runway and almost rolled the bird over. Yeah. That's one of the most dangerous things about helicopters is rolling them over when you're close to the ground. So with a helicopter, we can drift in any which way we want. So if you're coming in to land, there's actually a really horrible video. If you're interested, I believe it was a CH-46 that was trying to land on a carrier and got the wheel caught on something on the side, and then added just a little bit of power, and the whole thing flopped over and went into the water, and a bunch of people got killed. But it's actually very easy to roll these things over, and the crazy thing is, a lot of my students, when they come in to land, and they got this collective, and they're like, oh, I just want to touch down nice and soft. And they do this maneuver, and it's like incredibly dangerous because we're so close to the ground, and if a wheel or your landing gear gets caught on anything and you start yanking up on that collective, if you have any kind of drift in, you could easily flip the thing over, so that's why I always tell people, like, when you come into land, just as soon as you get close to the ground, start pushing down on that collective and just keep pushing down, don't pull up after you've already committed to setting the helicopter down. Even if we touch down a little harder than you might normally want to, that's better than rolling the helicopter over and getting everyone killed, right? So everybody wants to butter the bread and touch it down nice and soft, and that's great, but it takes a little bit of skill to be able to do that consistently. And the better idea is just to get it on the ground, drop that collective out. Would you help Heavy D Sparks get his Blackhawk ticket? Yeah, of course I would. I don't know if I'm allowed. I'd have to clear it with some people, but yeah, if Heavy D Sparks wants some help, man, I'll help you out. I'll help you fly your Blackhawk. So I'd be checking those maintenance records though, because I saw you did a lot of work to it, but I would want to make sure that thing was tip top before I get inside. But Manny, Tom Graves, Heavy D Sparks got his Blackhawk. Oh, he already got his license. Okay, great. Flew it back to Utah. That's an interesting place to live. Can you talk about how Ryan W. asks, can you talk about health hazards related to beryllium parts of the aircraft? I've heard some stories about amputations resulting from that. I'm not really tracking anything about beryllium and what that can do to you. I know it's not good for you, but generally speaking, as long as you don't crash the helicopter, you should be all right. But I have heard stories about there was an aircraft crash, some helicopter crash, and there were some guys sent out to go guard the crash site, and then a lot of the smoke came up out of the crash. There's so many different chemicals. These guys inhaled the smoke, and I think they ended up dying from that. So the key is just to not crash, because all that stuff is, whatever hydraulic fluid and all this stuff. And that's in any aircraft. 747s have hydraulics and stuff like that. So any kind of dangerous chemicals. There's all kinds of stuff in your engine compartment in your car that you don't want to be breathing in. Imagine getting brake fluid in your eyes or something, you know, like that's not going to end well for you. So, yeah, unfortunately, that's just where we're at. You know, we got dangerous chemicals in aircraft, so if you crash them and rupture something that shouldn't be ruptured, then I guess yeah, there's always a potential hazard. But I mean, there's a lot of hazards associating with crashing an aircraft. So the idea is just to not do that if you can avoid it. Let's see. DCS has a sale on right now. Oh, are you talking about for the Apache? I don't know, man. I don't know. Let's see. Here's Josh Burns again. Yeah, I passed all my drug tests. Want to be a helicopter pilot so bad it's a dream. Rather fly and quit. It's easy for me to quit. Well, I would go talk to your Army recruiter and you know, let them know that it was just a few times, and you know, I don't know, they might you might be able to get a waiver for that. It's possible. I don't know. You got to talk to the Army recruiter. But I think there's some people who have gone to a recruiter and said, yeah, you know, I smoked pot a couple times. They're going to ask you, you know, every branch is going to ask you about your drug history. And I think with pot, I think they can be more lenient if you know, if it was only a few times you did it in the past. I don't know. So you would just have to talk to a recruiter and, you know, just let them know, yeah, I got this thing that, you know, in my past. But I think there's a lot of people who you know, may have tried that stuff at one point in their lives, and they try not to totally disqualify people from joining just because maybe you made a mistake here or there or whatever. But yeah, I would talk to your recruiter, ask them, and see what they say, and you know, who knows, you might get in. But if you quit, I mean, you know, part of the for those who are interested in you know, joining the Army as a pilot, one of the things that they're counting on to weed through people who, you know, are not qualified for the job is people who are just going to give up along the way. It's not an easy process to get selected, right? And that's on purpose, right? We don't want just anybody waltzing in here and being like, oh, well, you know, you know, I was a plumber and now I'm ready to be a pilot. You know, well, you might be a really great candidate or you might be a terrible candidate, right? We're going to find out. We're going to find out if you're willing to put the work in. And so the packet process for both people going street to seat or for active duty members trying to become a pilot, it's very extensive, and that's on purpose. So you want especially for the active duty people who are looking to go potentially become a warrant officer in the Army, the packet process is not easy, right? And you wanna get that packet looking like you're submitting it to the President of the United States, and like he's the one who's going to be hand selecting everybody for the job. And I've seen some people who just half-ass it and don't get picked up because the board's going to tear your packet apart. You know, they're going to be like, "Oh, look at that! He's got this word misspelled on the front page, and he didn't even fill this block out in this form." You know, like they'll just throw it in the trash. I mean, I've never been on a board, but you have to think that you have to imagine that those people are going to just like eviscerate every word you say. So you want to come off as the very best version of yourself when you're trying to put that in. But anyhow, the whole packet process, it's meant to be difficult on purpose because we're trying to weed out the quitters, right? We definitely don't want quitters in this job because there's no time for people who don't want to put in the effort, right? It requires an intense amount of effort, and that's really the hardest part, right? It's not about being the smartest person or about, you know, I think people get it in their head that they're just going to be like a natural and they're going to get in the cockpit and they're just going to be able to fly like Maverick on the first day, and it's just not the case, right? It's not the case for really anybody. There have been a couple studs I've seen come through who do really well, but you know, you're not going to be flying like 1,000-hour pilot, you know, on your first day. The hardest part is putting in the effort. So if you're willing to take the time and put in the effort, I think a lot of people, most people can be successful at this job, but you got to be willing to put that time in, you know. And something I've seen with like, I hate to say, but like the newer generation, they're just like used to things being really easy and used to things, it's like that microwave society where things are just ready instantly. Like, yeah, I want to download a 12 gigabyte file, and man, it's taking like 6 minutes download 12 gigabytes, where some of us older folks remember if you had a download speed of like 3 kilobytes per second, you were doing really good. Um, but but yeah, just that whole mentality I think is like people expect to get it a lot quicker, but there's a lot of effort that needs to be put in still to be a successful and a safe pilot. Um, cool. Then I mean, let's see. I use bows. Let's see, basically same as the A20 for 400. Nice. Hey, that's a good tip that Rob H just put out there about the Bose Q35. That's awesome. Yeah, A20s are pretty awesome. This is great. All right, Rob H says, my son wants to be a pilot. He is trying to decide if he should attempt warrant officer without the private pilot or if he should get that first. Yeah, I think, wasn't that you I was talking about earlier? Yeah, I would, if he's already gotten picked up, then I would say it's not necessary. It would just be kind of icing on the cake. But if he's not been accepted yet, then that's a different story. Having a private pilot license when you're applying to become a warrant officer in the Army, I think that would look really good on a packet. If I were the one on the board, I'd be like, hey, this guy's already got his PPL. That's great, man. Like he's probably going to succeed. He's already proven that he can pass a check ride in the civilian world, which is pretty stringent, and a civilian, my check ride was pretty stringent. My evaluator was, he wasn't just there to, give me an easy A. He was like, you're going to earn this, so if I saw that for an applicant, I would say that that would look really good. Cool. Awesome. Well, it looks like that's everybody's questions. Dang, we've been here for like an hour and a half already. So, hey, thanks everybody for joining me for this live Q&A. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate all the questions, and I really appreciate everybody who's liked and subscribed on my YouTube channel, and really trying to build that into something that a lot of people can benefit from. And it's definitely all you folks who are commenting on the videos who are kind of helping the community of flight simming and people who are interested in aviation, potentially making it a career, keeping that that little flame alight. It's all you guys who are keeping the conversations going. So thanks so much to all you guys. Really appreciate you joining me, and be having some really cool videos coming out soon. So let me know on my little community page if you have anything you'd like to see in particular, and I'll try to make it happen in the future. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Snack Packs out.